fantastic.
It's the technology is amazing for what a guy can do just from a laptop. I can do this program live, and I do it Monday through Friday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And not only that, but I'm also taking calls, and I have guests. And by the way, people can call in and are calling in right off the street. It's great. And the number, by the way, the number is 617-396-4958. That is the phone number if you'd like to call the live reiteration or iteration of Charles Moscowitz Live. And let me just call up my Skype so I can make sure that the calls come in properly. There's so many things to do, and it seems like oftentimes when I do this, I forget one step. So, and we don't want that to happen. Let's just
understandable.
Skype, and there we go. All right, I think we're in. So, Michael Schmidt, you're a blogger. You've got a site on LinkedIn, which is where I follow you, and you've written a very interesting article talking about Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution and how there are sort of echoes of that, if you will, in what's happening in politics today. So let's start there.
Okay. Thank you, Charles, for having me on again.
Yeah.
I as you know, I use history as a guide and in my writing, and so it's always interesting to take a look at where we're at and try to find parallels in history and figure out, okay, as the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. So something has occurred in the past that can give us insight into where we're at. And so I think Mao's Cultural Revolution, or a Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, as it was called, that started in August 1966, very much has a parallel to the Cultural Revolution we are seeing here in America. I think if people can understand this and maybe get into the heart of it, it will give them a much better perspective of where things have been going in America and where things are heading if we continue down this road. So in August 1966, Mao basically wanted to cleanse China, if you will, cleanse the Communist Party.
Yes.
He felt it was getting a little too much bourgeois, and he wanted it to bring back to more of the ideological roots. And so he'd kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. And so he wanted to kind of gain control and kind of get it back. And his whole deal was to try to get rid of the four olds: old culture, old habits, the old culture, old customs, old ideas. So he wanted to basically bring China into his vision and modernize it and purge all of that old history of China and make a new China. And so much like you see going on now here in America with, we've noticed over the last couple of years with the statues, of whether it's Jefferson or Washington or Confederate war heroes. It's again destroying some of this old history of America and trying to break those ties down. Now in China, Mao took college students, so he took the youth and kind of made what they called the Red Guards. And I would consider the Red Guards very similar to the BLM and the Antifa groups that you see roaming around the cities of America these days. And they kind of are doing the same thing. They were kind of the enforcers. They were out there.
Right, the shock troops. I mean, Lenin
the shock troops,
in the Bolshevik
like
Revolution.
The brown shirts.
The brown shirts, correct.
Yeah. It's you notice this. It's not anything that's unusual in history. You see this with socialist, totalitarian regimes.
It's like a private army, basically, and it's a hallmark of a National Socialist or International Socialist regime. And I just think we need to be clear that when you were talking about the Cultural Revolution in China, We're not necessarily saying that that's literally the direction the United States is going on the ground, because China probably murdered upwards of 20 million people as a result of that Cultural Revolution. So we're not going that far left. I also just want to, if I might, mention a quick little plug here for myself. My book just went online this morning, my newest. I'm writing a series of pamphlets this year. I hope to write one a month. Okay. And this is number 2, and it's called Toward Fascist America. I was going to call it Toward Nazi America, but my daughter objected to that. So I try to make it a little more tame. But it's now available as a softcover and as an ebook, and it kind of deals with similar thoughts, Michael, that you have in your writings in terms of taking a look at what's happening. Because I say the year 2021 is the year that this has really been launched in earnest, and I do say that. So getting back to what you're talking about, so you're identifying the philosophical elements of the Cultural Revolution and how that pertains to our country. You mentioned that Mao sought to get rid of history, basically, get rid of independence and culture and free thought, because it stood in the way of his revolutionary ideas. He also coined the phrase continuous revolution, and that a revolution only happens at the barrel of a gun. So, it had to be, the communist revolution isn't something that just happens once. It's ongoing, it's continuous, which means that any dissent from it needs to be purged, sort of like what big tech is doing now to opinion. We don't want to go too far into that because we're on big tech. So that's one of the reasons.
It all ties together, though, Charles. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. No, and like I pointed out in my piece, the American version of Mao's Cultural Revolution, this is. We're seeing it speed up now over the last couple of years, and especially over the last year, and now with Joe Biden in the White House and the group he has around him, or the cabal he has around him, with all these executive orders and executive actions, we are seeing this kind of process even speed up more. But this has been a process over the last 50, 60 years. It's been a real undermining of this republic. And, it started with basically groups like the Weather Underground in the 60s, and people like, Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn. Those people didn't just, go away and vanish. They got into the underbelly of American society.
Literally. I mean, I just, as a footnote on that one, I think it was Barbara Rosenberg, I believe her name was one of the Weather Underground who was involved with bombing the U.S. Capitol building, ironically. She fled the country, went to Cuba, then she's pardoned by Obama, comes back to the United States, and she's one of the chief advisors to Antifa. Mm-hmm. So, literally it's a continuum. It's going on. And I think that, Michael, your insight on, the Guard, the Red Guard, the shock troops, that is exactly what this is. These are the Democratic Party, irregulars. They're the shock troops. This is what the Ku Klux Klan used to be for the Democratic Party until the 1960s, when it was largely destroyed by the FBI. But in this case, it also operates, and this is true, I think, in the case of Mao Zedong as well. There is the scissor concept. I don't know if you're familiar with that. In other words, the scissor has 2 blades, one from the lower and one from the upper. The lower blade is Antifa, BLM, and the other terrorist groups. The upper blade is the Democratic Party, the boardrooms, the top 1%ers. Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street was right, technically, when they talked about the top 1%. What they didn't tell you is that same top 1% is part of this revolution. I mean, they're on the left. They have a benefit from it. And so you have both of those factors basically scissoring down on the society, which is caught in the middle and is caught in the blades.
Well, it is said that that republics decline into democracies, and democracies degenerate into despotisms. And if you notice, and language is important, and I think people need to understand this. Words have meaning. So listen to when people talk. Listen to when Democrats talk. Listen to when their supporters and these radicals talk, whether it's BLM, whether it's Antifa, whether it's some of these far left socialists, like AOC and Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. Listen to their words and how they talk. They never refer to America as a constitutional representative republic. They always refer to it as democracy, right? Well, we're not a democracy. Our founding fathers didn't intend for this to be democracy.
No, they hated democracy.
No, it's completely antithetical to what they wanted. They fought. Their whole process was to set up something other than a democracy.
Exactly, and you look at the notes
in history how democracy goes.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the notes of Jefferson and Madison, their correspondence. Yep. The correspondence between John Adams and Abigail Adams. I mean, there were other, the Federalist Papers, the notes to the convention. They hated democracy. Mm-hmm. Democracy was mob rule. Democracy had been rejected by actually the ancient Athenians because it wasn't practical on the surface, but in the broader sense, it completely suppressed the minority. And in this country, when we developed our republican system, the system is set up to protect the right of the minority, not the majority. Right. It defends the most vulnerable people in our society, the weakest members of the society. I think that Ayn Rand put an interesting point on that in her objectivist theories when she said that the weakest and the most vulnerable of all minorities is the individual. And the individual is standing up against a state apparatus which operates and threatens to operate in the context of mob rule. And in a sense, this is one of the great contributions to the world, besides the religious contribution, of Jesus. Jesus stood up to the state as a single person, as an individual. When Pontius Pilate said, "Who do you answer to?" he said, "I answer to a higher authority. I answer to God," basically. And shortly after that, he was executed within an hour of that. So that is what America is all about. The minority standing up for their own sovereign rights under God. And then from there, it evolves into your family, your community, and then your nation, which is set up to protect those rights, not grant those rights.
Right. Well, and here's to go off of what you're talking about, Calvin Coolidge had said years ago that liberty is not collective; it's personal. And all liberty is individual liberty, and so, but you can see where they're going with this whole process. They want it to be a collective good. Especially look at the virus situation. Wear a mask. Follow these mandates. Follow these draconian lockdowns because it's for the collective good. Right. Well, that's antithetical to America and to our founding, because each individual should have a right to choose whether or not they want to wear a mask, whether or not they want to. If you personally feel that, hey, wearing a mask is gonna protect you from a virus, then by all means go ahead and do that. And you shouldn't make that other person feel bad for wearing a mask. Likewise, that person shouldn't guilt you into feeling bad for not wearing a mask because you feel, I don't feel personally in my head that it's worth, that this is a big deal. So I'm gonna take my chances. I'm gonna have my, take my vitamins and live a healthy life and choose to go that way. And that's the way our founding fathers intended for us to go about living life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, however you feel to choose. They have a different path. Their path is they want the collective. They want you to be beholden to the Democrat Party, a single party state. And the state tells you what to do, tells you how high to jump, when to jump, and they tell you you'll be happy with this. And they will give you whatever, they'll try to take care of you from cradle to grave. And that's their whole mentality. And if you look throughout history, it's never worked. Now, it makes this sort of cultural revolution here in America, I think, much more interesting. And I try to call these, I call them neo-Marxists.
Right.
Because they take a twist off of the Marxist state where it's class struggle, and it's now race and gender that tends to be where they're defining it. Everybody's got to fit into a racial group or a gender group. and everyone is an aggrieved group of
Right,
some
and you
kind.
have to, in a sense, you're required to identify in any one of these
Yes.
categories.
Yes.
But I just want to talk about you. I want to comment on what you said about the pandemic, because I think that's interesting. The conventional American approach has been for the federal government and for state governments, well, more federal actually, to operate as a bully pulpit. In other words, you have the president, you've got the, the apparatus that deals with health, like the national, the CDC and whatnot. They need to come out with guidelines in terms of what to do in a pandemic. They need to come out with suggestions. They need to come out with guidance. But that's much different than using mandates and using force. I think that most people don't want to catch the virus. They have enough common sense to protect themselves. You don't have to, this is being used as an excuse by governments, particularly state governments, because under President Trump, the federal government didn't do this. They were more conservative. They helped the states. They supported the efforts by the states, but they didn't do what a lot of people on the left wanted them to do, which is basically declare martial law and call out the army. They didn't do that. They worked very conservatively, and the states were given more leeway, but some states became almost like dictatorial. You had crazy, laws on, in like in Michigan,
New York, look at California.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, the governor allows for you can buy booze and lottery tickets, but you can't buy, you can't buy, seeds to grow a garden or plant or instruments. Or in New York, they were actually putting people with the virus in nursing homes. By mandate, while at the same time the federal government sent a hospital ship which sat there empty for 3 weeks. So you've got some governors acting very dictatorially, and I think that my fear is that now that the pandemic is lessening, and however that's coming about, whether it's from vaccines or just by nature, I think probably a combination of both. The thing is, the numbers are dropping now. And I'm afraid that some of these governors, and now the federal government under Biden, which has the same authoritarian bent, they're hooked on this. They're not going to give up this kind of mandate. They're going to, you're going to continue to do maybe, I don't know, lockdowns, but heavy regulation and of various aspects of public life. And I think that unfortunately, younger people, college age students, people in that generation, they've been so easy to accept this. I mean, they don't question it. Everybody kind of goes along. It's a reflection of our dumbed down education. I don't know.
Well, and that goes back again to what I was talking about earlier, how this cultural revolution has started, 50, 60 years ago, because a lot of these Marxist, socialist, communists, they got into the education system. They got into colleges, universities. They got into our K through 12 educational public school systems. And they have had a chance to indoctrinate, several generations of kids with this mindset. And so when you start tearing down, American history, when you start teaching that socialism and communism and Marxism is a worthwhile goal, and that it's a great form of utopia. Yet history shows us otherwise. You see where we've gone, and you now a lot of when you look at some of these surveys, and I don't take polls usually very seriously, because a lot of the polling data is just not very good. But when you see that half of young kids think that socialism is a positive thing,
a virtue,
yeah, I mean that should that should tell you right there that the education system has done. From their point, I mean, I will tip my hat. They have done a great job, and folks on our side of the aisle, conservative folks, have sat down and basically rolled over and been ignorant and blind to what's been happening of the undermining of this republic. And so that's one of the reasons why I write my stuff, is to try to wake people up and educate people and use history and try to show people what's going on before it's too late, because freedom and liberty, once it's lost, is lost forever. It's gone. And
the people that have usurped it aren't giving. They get used to and they get drunk with the allure of that kind of power, and they don't give it up so easily. All right, my guest is Michael Schmidt. Let me give out the phone number. You're welcome to join the conversation, 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. Michael, I was interviewed recently by Timothy Flanders from The Meaning of Catholic. It's a really interesting program that he does. And one of the things that I heard him mention recently was that from a Catholic perspective, not from a conventional perspective, he talked about the effeminacy of men in this country, and that he defined that not in the conventional sense, but more in that men are afraid to be hated. We're afraid to make people angry, including our spouses and our families. We don't want to take a strong stand on something because we believe it's right, and we're going to go out and put our neck out there and do it, because that's classic masculinity, not toxic masculinity, but actually righteous, elements. And not that women can't do that as well, of course they can, but the point is that, and then he correlates that with the example of Jesus, who was hated by the establishment in his day, and which crucified him. But that example of going out and identifying evil and standing up to it and calling it out, and the response to that is going to be anger and hatred and calumny and risk. But that's what we need right now, And anyway, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think I would say we need patriots, people to stand up like our founding fathers did.
Yes.
And because in a strange twist of history, we now see that instead of fighting against King George III, it's really a statist.
It's the same enemy.
Yeah,
it's just different. Instead of wearing ermine and pearls, they wear, business suits. It's the same.
Well, we've come full circle. We've gone back into we're heading back into the chains of tyranny again, and almost little over 240 years later. And so, how this republic ends, are we going to be just a footnote in history, or that's going to be up to the American people to decide. But at some point, I'm still hopeful that there's enough patriots left in this country that there's enough of the silent majority, because I will tie this into what's going on now with the impeachment proceedings, which are completely unconstitutional.
It's like a final nail in the coffin of the coup. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to go. We can't go too much into that because YouTube, the people that run YouTube don't like talking about that.
I will say though that it's not Donald Trump who's on trial. It's you. It's me.
Exactly.
It's the silent majority who are on trial.
Right. It's an assault on basic truths, because the truth about, let's just say, the truth around the election is something that people, they want to bury, I would argue, and they, maybe even in a way, a few people might have a few pangs of guilt over that. And I think this is like, it's classic psychology here. They're just taking on, they want to they're salting the earth, basically. It's like when the Romans defeated Carthage, it wasn't enough to defeat them. They actually they bulldozed over the whole city, and then they salted it. So that's what they're trying to do. I think it's going to backfire. But, you also brought up the issue. You played the race card. You brought up the fact that, yesterday I had on the show Joshua Mitchell, who's a professor at Georgetown University and who's written several really interesting books about this question. And, the point being that, we're deliberately creating this new dialectic of conflict between people divided up into ethnic and racial categories. And in a way, Marx's original theory of how to divide a society and weaken it so that one can implement collectivism was by class. You had the bourgeois and the proletarians, and that there was the great conspiracy theory that underlies that is the theory of exploitation. The idea that somehow if you're more successful, you got there by ripping off someone who's less successful.
Mm-hmm.
That this is a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And I think it was starting in the maybe late 1950s, 1960s, you had a shift. And one of the theoreticians in that was Frantz Fanon, who was a communist thinker from Montserrat, who wrote the book called The Wretched of the Earth, where he said that the issue should not be seen as class going forward in our assault on the Western democracies, particularly the United States, but the issue should be race, because that's their weak point, or for that matter, regionalism. He was into this whole idea of the North versus the South in the world as at war. And that since then, the shift has been that people are to be identified, and often in a very hyper way, with their race, and increasingly with their ethnic background, their gender, and their sexual orientation. And there are other various derivatives. And that becomes not only the sum total of who you are, which promotes a collectivist view, and how you're to be viewed by everybody who's not in that designated group, but that there is this built-in conflict, and that the conflict, and this was obviously an issue brought up by Joshua yesterday, that being Joshua Mitchell, is that the oppressor is straight white men,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's who they're going after. And he pointed out that it's not going to stop there, because if men surrender this, then they're going to go after women, white women. They're going to go after black men who are into family values and who have, who are, heterosexuals and who are married. And it's going to we're never going to get to the end of it. It's just going to keep going, they'll keep peeling away, because this is an assault on individual rights. It's an assault on the sovereign citizen under God. It's an assault on, truth, really. I mean, and on all of the various institutions that have buttressed truth and has made this country what it is: private ownership, business, small business, everything, all of it. I mean, all the separations.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why I call this, that's why I call it neo-Marxism, because it's really just a different twist on Marx's theory. But I mean, look at the executive orders and executive actions that Joe Biden has taken so far. And you have to really understand this is
it's ruled by fiat.
He was, and that's what it is.
It's ruled by fiat. He signed 17 orders the minute he stepped into office. Yeah. Shockingly, or maybe not so shockingly, it's
I mean, he called himself a moderate, right? Well, I don't know of any moderate, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, who would go into the White House and start signing, executive orders.
Yeah. And the irony is, how did those orders get on the desk within 24 hours of his being sworn in? Now we know how, unfortunately. That being former Attorney General William Barr apparently did this. Yeah. He vetted them, he prepared them, and he put, it's really a terrible betrayal, not just of Trump, but of just everyone.
Well, and again, there are so many. I've told people, I said this is almost like a reverse McCarthyism. If you go back to Senator Joe McCarthy, the former senator from Wisconsin, he was in the 50s trying to root out communists in the government. Well, now it's kind of flipped, and the communists are trying to root out conservatives.
Because the communists have now control the high ground. Right?
Yes.
They now control the cultural institutions, the business institutions, the top 1%. Look at big tech, right? All the big corporations. They even control the churches. I have a guest coming on Friday who's going to be talking about that. He's a minister, but they have infiltrated. And they've gradually, this didn't happen overnight, it happened over decades. Yep. They kind of worked their way up the rat line by bringing in the younger members who are friends and who are associates, and then weeding out the conservatives over time through attrition. And it's all very indivisible. It's all, even like Boston Magazine in my own hometown of Boston recently did an article about, how the universities are in this country. And Massachusetts and New England was at like 98% liberals in colleges. That didn't happen overnight. You know, they kind of marginalized and pushed out, probably gave them a few awards as they were out the door, you know, anyone who was not on the left. And then they brought in their left-wing friends as positions opened up. I mean, this is how they do it. I think it was former Supreme Court Justice Potter, I believe, who wrote a very interesting paper in the early 70s warning about this, saying this is how the left is going to take over the culture. And I think I was listening to Tom Hartman, who's a left-wing radio host, you know, doing shows about this. Oh, this is a conspiracy by right-wingers, you know, corporate interests. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I looked into it, and it was true. He did write this paper, and it's brilliant. You know, I mean, we should post it up and read it. Anyway, so we have the race conflict dialectic going out in spades, where now you can have people put under a microscope to find a racist gene. I mean, anybody who's not kowtowing to the left, if you were seen in 1962 at a hotel, and at that hotel, David Duke might have stayed there in 1948, all of a sudden, you know, here we have proof, you know.
Yeah, and your bank will probably out you to the government for if you look at what Bank of America
apparently. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. What you know, this is indicative of what I'm talking about in my short book, Toward Fascist America. Isn't it the case that Bank of America was voluntarily handing over bank records to the FBI with regard to people traveling to Washington to attend the peaceful protest that was supporting states who were contesting the election, and they were giving that information, and now they're helping an investigation of anybody? We should note that there were hundreds of thousands of people there, all peacefully protesting, which is just like what they did in the March on Washington with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke. There was a few tiny group of people who breached the Capitol. We don't know exactly who they were. That's still being investigated. But there was a lot of jumping to conclusions. There very well may have been Trump supporters mixed into that crowd. I think there probably were, and that's a shame. You know, they kind of got wrapped up in the emotion of it. But we don't know who the ringleaders were. I mean, to me, it doesn't look like Trump people. I'm just sorry. I don't know that. Nobody does. Right. But I've been doing, you know, I've been a close observer of these things and the public scene for a long time. I've seen the videos, I've seen the pictures, I've seen the language. They don't look, to me, that doesn't look quite right. I mean, that doesn't pass the smell test.
Right. Well, in some ways, you know,
we have to be careful how we talk about this.
I will be. I'll just say, but I mean, in some ways, you can go back to the old Reichstag fire.
Well, that's right. The Reichstag fire was ignited 2 or 3 weeks after Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany.
Yes, and he blamed it on the socialists.
He blamed it on a communist. It doesn't matter. The point is, and there's always been, historians have always debated whether it was an inside job. It doesn't really matter whether it was or not. What matters is that the Reichstag was burned down, and the Nazi government used that as an excuse to suspend the German Constitution. And that, of course, led to the complete takeover and the authoritarian regime of Hitler and World War II and the Holocaust and everything else. So I'm not saying that's what's happening here.
No. I just, like I say, I use history as a guide. And
yes,
I use it,
we can understand the dynamics of that and see parallels.
Yep.
But those parallels, we should note, have to be viewed in the American context. This is not Germany. This is not, you know, we don't have a Nazi apparatus here. I would contend. And we also have, and let's be positive about this, the Republicans have gained a lot of strength from this past election. I mean, they're within a hair's breadth of taking over the House. You know, they gained, I think, all of the seats which were contested. And by the way, all the Republicans who were elected, just for the matter of mentioning, happened to be either women or minorities. We should just, you know, that's what they say. So yes, at least 2 state houses were taken by Republicans, the state legislatures. And Republicans are poised to really have a major win in the midterm, which is only months away. So I don't think it's not quite, they might be, strutting around like peacocks up there in the White House, whoever's running that place, but they don't quite, this isn't Nazism. They don't have that kind of power. Ultimately, we still have a strong tradition here of independence and of sovereignty and of individual consciousness. And the Trump movement, actually has raised that awareness in a lot of ways. No matter what else they try to do to it, it's 75 million plus people who voted for Trump, and they did so for convictions.
I would say, as a caution to what you just said, though, I know you had a guest on several months ago, because I was on your show back in August a couple times, and you had a guest on just before I had come on, maybe a few weeks before that, about the Republican Party, and he was saying that the Republican Party, he came at it from a liberal point of view.
Right.
But for me, I would say the Republican Party has been destroying itself. And
Sure.
It has been destroying itself because the establishment Republicans, or what I would call the rhinos, the Republican in name only, they have destroyed any credibility with the base. Because
but they've been marginalized. I mean, they lost big time. I mean, I think that 85%, 90% of Republicans voted for Trump. And then you had 10 Republican House members led by Lynn Cheney voting for this fraudulent impeachment without any investigation, without hearings. It was almost like the kind of thing that they do in a Soviet system. I mean, I'm sorry, but, and now she's being primaried already. She has 90% of the people of Wyoming have said they want her to go. So I think that they've been put on their backsides.
And that's what I mean, and that's where I was going with this. And that's what people that are interested in, especially conservatives, they need to get out and get in the process, and start to primary out some of these establishment Republicans, the people that have been there such a long time. People like Mitch McConnell, people that have been there that are just, they don't have the interest of of you and me, and your basic American conservative in mind. Now they'll talk the talk, but they won't walk the walk. And we need to primary those people and bring up some real solid conservative contenders that have a backbone and that believe in conservative principles and ideals, and don't just talk it, but actually when they get to Congress, they actually will follow through on what they believe, and that's what we need. We need a movement to much like the left has done with the Democrats. You look at these communist socialists that have gotten into the Democrat Party. They've made inroads.
They have. I mean, there's a whole clique of them. I mean, there's several new Democratic House members who make the squad look like Winston Churchill. I mean, they're like so far left.
Yeah. And I think we need that kind of a counter movement in the Republican Party. And so that's just my own personal 2 cents worth.
Exactly. And I think that it's I've talked about this, and I think that when I do, it's something that is happening, in that you've got Republicans and even conservative Democrats and independents running for office on the local and state level, running in their local cities and towns for city council, running for state rep, state senator. And they're realizing that these are races that can be won. I mean, it's not that difficult. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of publicity. Sometimes you'll go in and you'll find out that the incumbent has been there for like decades and didn't do much, and or has run unopposed, and that you can win. You can win by just doing a few, doing some phone calls, going door to door, setting up, raising small amounts of money, getting free media through the local cable stations and through social media. I mean, there are all these things you can do. I think I should probably, my next pamphlet should be about how to do this. I should write a book. Maybe I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Run for office. I mean, this is how you take back the country. This is how
all politics are local, Charles, and it starts at your local level. And I'm talking school boards, I'm talking city council, town councils, and I mean, again, go back to the virus situation. Look at how every area is different, and
right.
If you want to start taking back again and start really having that representative republic that you're looking for, then it starts about getting involved and being good stewards of this republic. So.
Exactly. And I want to make a comment about this that gets a little sensitive because of the censors. But the fact is that we learned a few things from this last election about governors and secretaries of state and private entities usurping the powers of state legislatures. State legislatures under the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 3, have the sole discretion to regulate elections on the federal and state level. They have the discretion to appoint delegates for the Electoral College. They also have the authority to do a lot of things that they have forgotten about and that they have not exercised. And there's an enormous amount of constitutional power there because they represent the people. They're not fiat power. I mean, a Secretary of State doesn't, that's an executive office. It's the legislators who have the power to make laws. And so I think that people are starting to run for these offices. Local state rep, local state senator, depending on your state, they have different names, and getting into these offices and beginning to, utilize the levers of power that are provided them by their state and federal constitution. That's where we need to be. If you have an issue you care about, go for that office. You will be heard. The media will cover you, even if you don't win, and you very well might win. You might be surprised, how many people can win. I mean, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. She did it, for better or for worse. I mean, it can be done. You're a housewife. You're retired. You're a teenager. You've got a little time on your hands. You're semi employed, part time. You can do it. You can get out there and get that done. This is something that to me is one of the things I'm going to really hammer away at this year.
Yeah, good. I'm glad because it needs to be voiced, and we need to get more people engaged in the process. And again, that's another reason why I write, and I know it's a reason why you do what you do, and I'm a fan of your work, and so I appreciate you. I appreciate you giving me time and having me back on your show again. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm developing a lot of regular guests. So, Michael, your article deals again with the corollary between the Cultural Revolution of Stalin and not Stalin, Mao.
Mao, yes.
And Stalin had his one. I mean, any communist leader does.
Yes.
Or Nazi. And what's going on right now in this country. So I want to get back to that a bit. We talked about the fact that the pandemic has led people to get used to fiat power by governors who, by the way, did not go to the legislatures. Again, legislators did not have a say in regulating things like mask wearing and shutdowns. Maybe they would have decided to do that. But the point is that we have a system where they are the sole authority to do it. Not the governor, not the Secretary of State, not judges. The legislature can actually stop a judge from making a ruling like that. I mean, they have that kind of power. That is really where it's at. So you have people getting used to this sort of fiat power under the guise of the emergency. People are scared. They scare the bejesus out of us. You're afraid to walk out the door or else you're going to catch this thing. So people are willing to accept that kind of authority. Right. You've got, of course, the big tech censorship, frankly, of the election. I don't want to go into what actually happened, but we all, wink and a nod. We know what happened.
Right.
And then you have now this this concentration of power on the federal level with these executive orders that are sweeping in nature. I mean, they can eliminate 11,000 jobs with the stroke of a pen on the XL pipeline, and no hearing, no debate in Congress, no opportunity for the American people to say anything about it. We didn't hear any justification for this. I mean, I assume that allegedly it's for the environment, but it doesn't really make sense because now they're going to have to put the oil in on trains and trucks. It's more dangerous. It's not going to, I mean, it's actually worse, in terms of risking environmental damage. And it's going to it could contribute to raising the price of oil, which is going to hurt working people, not rich people. They mean the George Soroses and the Nancy Pelosi's, and for that matter, the Donald Trumps, people who are billionaires, they're going to be fine. It's going to hurt working people who need to buy a carton of milk. If the price of oil goes up
every day to go to work.
Yeah, I mean, if the price of oil goes up, it's not just the oil that you put in your car and the gas. It's that you're transporting goods from point A to point B. The cost of that goes up, so the prices of everything is going to go up.
Yep, basic economics.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, this is
same thing with this $15 minimum wage.
Yes, $15 minimum wage. Exactly, it's going to wipe out possibly hundreds of thousands of jobs that might have otherwise come into existence.
Well, look at the restaurant industry has taken such a hit already with over the last year with the virus. Well, now you put in a $15 minimum wage. How do you expect some of these? I'm sure chains like Olive Garden and some of these restaurants have no problem with it. But I'm talking about
they're already hurting.
A mom and pop Italian restaurant or a pizza store.
Exactly. The mom and pops. And, the thing is that, again, things like minimum wage, traditionally decided by states and by cities and towns, I mean, depending on the economy in that area. I mean, this isn't to have the federal government march in and simply by decree, without any consideration for conditions that might exist in a local community. I mean, it's one thing to have a minimum wage on the Upper East Side, fine. But, or in some other left liberal community. But, it's not something that's going to necessarily fly if you're out in a poorer area or you're in a
good example is Seattle. Seattle tried it a few years ago. And, look at the data. It's been a disaster.
Exactly.
And so
that's right.
What do you think McDonald's is going to do? I mean, McDonald's is not going to hire, a 16-year-old, high school student. They're gonna put more kiosks in and let you, type in your order on a kiosk and
they'll have a computer flipping burgers. No, that's right. And signing the Paris, going back to this Paris Accord, that's just a giveaway to the oil companies who are going to raise the price. It gives an exemption to Russia and China, which gives them an advantage. It's going to create, again, we're going to be oil dependent, which is something that Trump actually accomplished, and it undoes that. And you've got a lot of things. I mean, you've got halting the border wall. Now you have caravans coming again for the border. By the way, these people are not going to have masks. Right? And they're going to stop catch and release. So people are just going to be released into the country. It's like, fine. Those are major, major decisions that ought to be handled by Congress, and we ought to get a say in it. Abortion is now being funded in foreign countries. We're going to be pressuring and blackmailing conservative and Muslim countries who don't want abortion to have abortion. This is eugenics. I mean, talk about they accuse Trump of having a Muslim ban, which is a lie. Now they're forcing Muslim countries to introduce something that runs against their religion, assumedly. It's like this is all being done by the stroke of a pen. So, we could go over some of the other draconian measures. It goes to your point, Michael. It's a cultural revolution. It goes to my point in my book, Toward Fascist America. This is what we're looking at right now in this society, and it's very dangerous.
It is very dangerous. And, it's a road that, like I said, if you look back on history, it doesn't end well. No. And that's why people like you and me need to continue to basically shout like Churchill shouted, back in the 30s, and say, hey,
and nobody listened to him. He read Mein Kampf, and he talked about it, and people marginalized him in the side.
And he was put in a corner and said, "Shut up,"
Shut up. And then you had the liberal establishment in London, headed by Chamberlain. Oh, we want to have peace and want to love, and we're gonna, So anyway, but Michael, let my viewers and listeners know where they can read your excellent work and get information about what you're doing.
Well, several areas where you can find me. I just started writing for contributing articles to politicrossing.com. It's a brand new website.
Okay.
It's kind of the intersection of faith and politics. So you can find my articles there. I'm trying to contribute at least one article a week to them. I've got my blog, conservativethinker.net. You can find all my work there. 5 years worth of great material there you can browse through. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. Just look me up, Michael Schmidt. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at BuckyBoyMike. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, if you're looking for somebody to contribute some writing and some pieces, I'm always open to offers. So feel free to contact me, and I would be more than happy to listen to whatever offers you have.
Excellent. Mike, thank you so much. As always, we should do it again soon. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate you having me back on again.
All right. Take care. Have an excellent afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
God bless.